we get into our rotating topic, which is our FY19 election with Maria Barnum. Hello, Maria. Welcome to the discussion.
Hello, thank you.
One of the things that I want to do is because there's a whole behind the scenes element to our election process as it relates to our nomination committee, and you are the chair for that committee. So I wanted to take the moment to introduce you to our section. So if you want to talk a little bit about who you are, what your SWE experience is, basically anything you want to do to introduce yourself to the section, that would be great.
Certainly. So I work as a systems engineer on an avionics product. I've been in Seattle for about 6 years, and I was involved with SWE before that. And then I came out here and got involved with SWE again. So some of the things that I've done are um, volunteer in the EC as a secretary for a couple of years, and work with the virtual brand team, helping out with some small tasks there. And then a lot of the election stuff, actually. So I've been really excited to talk about the special task force stuff to just make our whole election process better. And then also working on, volunteering on the Nom Com previously as well.
Yeah, that's been really cool. I think you've been a very good, consistent participation person. That was a little bit awkward, sorry, on our NomCom and as the chair of that. So it's
Thanks.
great to sort of be able to bring you to the table as a part of our digital digest. Now, in addition to your role as chair on the NomCom, there's also other people that are on the NomCom. And so I figured we'd also like to introduce ourselves to them. So you want to walk us through who's on your nominating committee?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a great team this year. Grace, who is currently the president of SWE PNW section, she is vice chair for our nomination committee, and Kalyani is a committee member, and as well as Kimber and Claire. And I believe Kalyani is also on the EC this year. I'm not sure what her role is. And then Kimber has been on the EC in the past. And Claire, I know, volunteers for the VBT, and I'm sure she does some other great stuff as well. So it's a pretty awesome team.
Yeah, so just so people can kind of think ahead to next year if it's something that they want to get involved with, what are some of the criteria for being on the NomCom?
I think generally the EC selects and votes in people who will volunteer for the NomCom. And you would want to be sort of involved with the section. Generally, if you've had experience volunteering on a committee or being an active member or being on the EC in the past and kind of knowing a little bit about how SWE PNW works, that's really great experience to have.
All right, excellent. And if I recall correctly, serving on the NomCom also means that you are not currently running for an officer position in that election cycle. Is that correct?
That is correct, right. So we wouldn't want people to be on the nomination committee who were running themselves, just to make sure that we can run a fair election without any bias.
Perfect. It's always good to hear that we've got those systems in place to support our election process. So speaking of not only the people, but the function of the NomCom, do you want to walk us through what the NomCom does for that election cycle?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the role of the NomCom is to facilitate an election cycle. So we come together to help facilitate the entire election process. So we do things like opening up the call for nominations, and then we work with the potential candidates. And then one of the big things we do is we um, provide a slate to the section. So once we've determined the slate of candidates that we would like to run next year, we send that out to the section so that everybody can vote. And we also implement the requirements of the section bylaws. So there are requirements for certain periods of time, like we have to have the elections open for a certain amount of time to make sure that it's fair, that everyone gets a chance to vote. So we make sure that we're following those rules.
Great, and I think that's an important point to make there is, I know, so I'll help reiterate that, is that the one of the functions of the NomCom is to make sure that we are in compliance with our bylaws That's part of being a nonprofit. It's part of being a SWE section. And so it's really great that we've got a good group of people helping to make sure that we've got that in place, and that we're staying on top of that. So with that kind of, now that we know a little bit about the people behind the scenes, where are we at in the election cycle? If we were to kind of map out what that looks like and where we are.
I really like this chart. It's so nice. So yeah, we're at the beginning. We have had our candidate interest forum, or otherwise known as our call for nominations, open for a couple of weeks. We did extend that date until the 18th, I believe, of April. So that's still open until the 18th, and then we're going to move on to the next phase in the process.
So do you want to give us a couple of highlights about what's coming down the pipeline next?
Yeah.
Or actually, the whole process here, because I think we've got a little bit more detail on the specific next steps on one of your later slides.
Yeah, so kind of more in the background. So everybody who is nominated or who nominates themselves for a position will go through our vetting process, which means that the Nom Com is going to talk to them and decide who that we want to slate to run in the election for next year. So once that's completed, we'll move on to announce the slate to the whole section. So that way everybody gets a chance to look at the slate, and that opens up our feedback period, which I believe is 15 days. So it's required to give everyone time to digest the information and make sure that they, collect any feedback that might come our way. And then after that, the slate is finalized, and we open up the voting period. So the election starts, and everyone who's a SWE PNW member can vote in that, and we encourage you to do so. The more votes, the better. And then finally, we'll close that out and announce the election results.
All right, that's perfect. And I know we said this before, but I do want to reiterate it. So you want to tell us what the positions are this year and like what the terms are?
Sure. So president-elect is a 2-year term. So this is a role of the person who works with the current president for 1 year and then becomes the president next year. So we don't actually elect our presidents every year. We elect president-elect, and then they run, or they volunteer for 2 years in that role. First as elect and then as president.
And I'm just going to jump in and say that that's a really cool thing, because it also follows the model that the society level has, where the president-elect serves for a year before becoming president as well. So I like that we follow that at a section level.
Yeah, I think it's pretty powerful. It gives a chance to hand off as much information and do training, make sure that our section has continuity. The other roles, 2 vice presidents. So outreach, this is the person who is going to coordinate and run all our outreach events and make sure that we continue to have an awesome outreach, because that's a really important part of SWE and our mission and what we like to do. And then we have professional development. So this is someone who is going to coordinate all of our professional development events, and we have a lot of really cool events that the section does. So that's an awesome job, and they can work with committees as well as outreach can also work with committees to fulfill those parts of our section. And then secretary and treasurer. So secretary, working with bylaws and the meeting minutes and all of that great stuff that makes the section run. And then the treasurer, who works with our all-important finances and make sure that we're following all those rules and doing wise things with our money.
So if somebody was interested in running for one of these, since we're in that candidate, the call for candidate piece, what kind of information would somebody need to have to complete the candidate interest form?
So to complete the candidate interest form, you don't need very much information. We just kind of want to know who you are. We want to know that you're interested, and we want to know what you're interested in. And of course, we require that anyone who's running our election is a registered SWE member in SWE PNW. And then you can provide anything else that you'd like us to know, like you could send a LinkedIn profile, some information from your resume, or just a statement about why you want to run for a position. As we go through the vetting process, we'll talk more about different things, but the candidate interest form is relatively short.
Yes, and I will also reiterate that this is definitely up on our webpage, and so you can go find that. But speaking of our webpage, we also have this other really cool feature this year, built off of our idea from last year about having an election central. Do you want to walk us through what we can find there?
Yeah, you bet. So I love this idea. Basically, everything that you want to find out about the elections are found on the website at this link. And you can see the blog posts that we have. You can find out about the candidates. You can go and look at everything that we did last year, which we posted everything at different stages so that people could engage with the process and see who was on the slate, who was running, could see candidate bios, all kinds of really good stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to to get a sense of our election, go check out the archive from last year. And it's under our archive section, the second link up from the bottom on the left from our webpage. And I think my favorite part from last year is we were able to introduce the candidates to the section through a live sort of moderated Q&A session that we recorded and put out on our YouTube channel. So I really encourage people to not only check out last year's archive, but keep an eye on the FY19 Section Election Central, because it is your one-stop shop for all election news, especially as it becomes available. So then I think we're going into sort of that like immediate next step here in terms of that vetting process. Oops, I apologize. Apparently my slides just wanted to move without me. So the next part is our candidate vetting. Do you want to walk us through a little bit about what's going on with this, and especially how it relates back to what comes out of some of that special task force work?
Sure. So this is something that we're trying to do to make our vetting process more robust, and we want to have the most fair and unbiased elections as possible. So one way to do that is to ensure that everybody is being vetted against the same standards. So that's kind of the part that comes out of the task force. So the things that we're looking at this year are people who will go through the vetting process who haven't been nominated or nominate themselves. We're going to ask you for some information. We want to know about your past leadership experiences. We might have some questions that we'd like you to answer to just kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself. And then I think candidate agreement is on here, and that's basically understanding the responsibilities and roles of the role that you will be running for if you do get slated as a candidate to run in the election.
Yeah, and I think also coupled with that candidate agreement is the understanding of like what the term itself is, if I recall correctly, and then kind of what that means for transitioning from year to year, because the official term of our officers is the start of the SWE fiscal year to the end of the SWE fiscal year, which basically means it's a July to June term. But in order to successfully transition, there's work that has to happen a little bit before your official term and potentially after the end of your term, just to make sure there's some good handoffs. And then I think I'll go ahead and talk about the leadership competency assessment, because I know we talked a little bit about that, because I'm also an LCC coach, and I was making sure that we knew about this at the section level. And the second part of the candidate sort of information that goes to the Nom Com is the completion of the leadership competency assessment. You can see what that's built around in the upper right. It's communication, self-management and development, business acumen, coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship, and leadership abilities. This is being deployed through all parts of SWE for lots of really good reasons, but it's also used at the society level for vetting candidates. So this is going to be our first election cycle trying to build that into our candidate vetting process. There will be more information. There's a ton of great learning material in terms of how to complete the actual competency assessment, but that's going to be part of the information that flows into the Nom Com for the candidate vetting. So kind of wrapping up the candidate vetting and our Nom Com discussion, Maria, are there any final words that you want to share with the section about either the Nom Com or the election cycle, where we are, where we're going next?
Just that don't forget to submit the form if you're interested in being a part of the EC, and if the positions on the EC don't interest you, there are also a lot of other ways to get involved in SWE PNW. We have several appointed positions, and committee positions that'll be open after the EC is finalized.
Yeah, and that's a great point. There's always going to be areas that you can help, even if it's not as an elected officer. And I do know that we are coming up on the end of Maria's time with us here as our Nom Com chair. So before we officially go into our Ask Me Anything, Maria, any final words before you depart for the evening and leave us with some really great information on our election cycle?
Yeah, so definitely, if you're interested in running, I'd say go ahead and check out the nomination form, and make sure you do that before the 18th of this month. So in a little bit less than a week, that form will close. And then if you decide not to do that, definitely keep an eye out for our election. We want everybody to vote. So that'll be coming out as the process goes along. So please keep an eye out for that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I know you have to dash, so I think it's a great break point. Marina and I will stay on the line and we'll kind of do the official wrap up on our digital digest. But again, thank you from our SWE PNW members and officers, Maria, for stepping up and helping us with the chair position in this year's Nom Com. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today.